2 about slow practice. Now, this is something that everybody knows and nobody does. Everybody knows it's good for you and you should do it, and almost nobody really does this consistently. Sort of like the Sermon on the Mount. We all know we're supposed to, but we don't really do it. Slow practice. I'll say it again. Why don't we practice slowly? I think the reason is fairly obvious. We don't practice slowly because we love music and it's fun and we want to hear it go, and slow practice is boring. So, we act like children and give in to our desire to have a lot of fun. So that's really why. The reason it's so important to practice slowly is because practice is rehearsal. You are going to perform exactly in a way that comes directly out of the way that you practice. You're not going to practice one way and then go out on the stage and have a performance that's completely different and doesn't sound like your practice. They're going to match. And when I hear a student play, I can sit there and rattle off exactly what they have or have not done in practice, and it's sort of a, I don't know, I take a kind of delight in reading them, their pedigree. In the practice room, you did this, you ignored this, you did this, and watch them go, yeah, I did. It's sort of funny, kind of mean thing to do. The point, however, is that a pianist's practice is really, really obvious in the performance. You immediately will know how that pianist practiced. Practice is rehearsal. I was just talking to a relative of mine who's very interested in piano music and knows a lot about pianists, and he said supposedly Shura Tchaikovsky, the Russian pianist, was asked why he performed so accurately, why his concerts were so accurate, and he said, well, I don't practice wrong notes. Now I was thinking about that snarky answer, and actually it's dead on. It's really dead on. How you practice will determine how you perform, and so if there are things that are neglected in your practicing, those will fall apart in performance, whether it's accuracy or harmonic knowledge or rhythmic control or anything else. Think of it this way. Think of a play, a dramatic production that one must rehearse and put on. You would never allow, if you were the director, the actors to get their lines mixed up in the rehearsal. You wouldn't let them recite the wrong lines, or say it with the wrong accent, or go out there in the scene with half the right costume and half the wrong costume. You've got Hamlet's pants and Ophelia's dress on. That doesn't make sense. All the sets have to be correct, and the lighting has to be correct. In other words, what we're trying to do when we rehearse is we're trying to piece together, as soon as we possibly can, a perfect version of this thing. We're trying to get all the parts in the right place, and only then do we repeat it to get good at it. Never repeat something unless you want to get good at it. And one of the problems with fast practicing is that because we're missing out on a lot of the problem solving that goes with slow practicing, we are repeating a messy, haphazard, chaotic, unstable version of the piece. Well, if you repeat it, you will perform that way. In fact, you'll have a hard time not performing it that way once you've repeated it a few times. So practice must be as close as possible a slow but perfect version of the final thing. I'll say it again. Practice should be a slow but perfect version of the final thing. Because once we repeat it, we are rehearsing it into our minds and making it permanent. We're putting it in concrete. So let's take a look at how this might work. I've got the Beethoven F minor Sonata, Opus 2, that a lot of people play, right here. And it's not a terribly difficult piece. I'm not going to go through the fingering and technical challenges and things. We'll save all that for another video. I just want to show what a productive practice session might look like. First of all, I'm going to do an impression of a student who loves Beethoven and is super excited about it and decides to practice. obviously this is horrible. You hear that I'm rushing and I'm missing all kinds of notes and so on. And so why would I want to repeat that and rehearse that and get good at sounding like that? Of course, I don't, right? And yet, so many pianists will sit at the piano for a long time, for hours, doing things like that and internalizing bad playing. So instead, I'm going to admit that I have a problem being patient, and I'm going to turn to my little friend here, the metronome. And for this exercise, I've got it set to 80 to the quarter note. And that would sound like this. Fermata. Etc. Now, that's not very interesting. But you hear that even at a very early stage of learning, let's say this is my first day with this piece, I actually can get a pretty close to perfect but slow version of this. Yes, I played a wrong note here and there. Yes, there's some other things I need to pay attention to. However, overall, you hear, it's mostly there. That I can now rehearse. I can repeat that. So what I strongly recommend is that you actually sit down and force yourself to do most of your practicing slowly by using a metronome. And I even will write out my day's work. You know, this particular piece or this section, I want to do this 10 times at a certain slow metronome marking. And then this other piece, I want to do, you know, this section at such and such a tempo. And I'll actually write it out like an agenda so that I don't get distracted and start, you know, playing too fast and so on. So I hope it's obvious why slow rehearsal of a very good version of your piece will lead to better playing as opposed to fast, haphazard, chaotic playing, and where those two paths will lead. One other thing that I think is extremely important, when I don't deliberately practice slowly, what is determining my tempo? When I was being this crazy kid before, what was determining my tempo? Well, adrenaline, my idea about how fast the piece should go, maybe a sense of excitement or nervousness or whatever. So how fast am I going to go? My adrenaline and my impatience is going to keep pushing the tempo up and up and up and up. What's going to limit me? Well, what's going to limit me is the piece utterly falling apart. Somewhere there's some tempo where the piece will utterly fall apart. Now, if I were practicing more diligently, what would limit me would be a much slower tempo. But reality is, hi over there, I can't see you. Reality is it's a faster tempo where I utterly fall apart. So adrenaline, excitement pushes my tempo up and up and up, and the two meet like that. And that is where I play, right at the edge of falling apart. And then I repeat that, and I repeat that, and I repeat that. And what I have rehearsed and internalized in myself is a tempo right at the edge of falling apart. Now, this is completely my early history as a musician, and I'm absolutely confident that that is the case with many, many, many others, because I teach them every day. That they feel every time they get out to perform, they are right on the edge of disaster, and they somehow can't help it. Well, you see why? It's because they taught themselves to do that. We taught ourselves to do that by rehearsing that. The only way not to do that is to play far more slowly than you could play. You should not play your fastest, let alone faster than that so that you start missing notes and everything. But even your fastest where it sounds good, don't even do that. Go way below. The reason is, one of the things that you are rehearsing when you play slowly with a metronome is you are rehearsing the ability to deny your own rhythmic impatience. You are learning to groove. You are learning to keep time. And if the only thing that determines your time is your excitement and adrenaline, every time you get nervous or excited, your tempo is going to go up, and you won't be able to calm it down. And we've all heard this. We've all been to recitals. Somebody gets up on the stage, they start, everything's okay. The tempo goes up and up and up until it explodes and the piece falls apart. We've all heard it. Probably most of us have done it. So if you actually force yourself to play slowly, 80% of your time, 80% of your practice time should be slow with a metronome, and practice denying that impatient quality in yourself. You know what it's like? You ever see somebody walk a dog and the dog's just pulling against the collar the whole time? And you sort of think, you're a stupid dog, because obviously the human is just not going to go any faster. This is how fast the walk is going to be. So if you would just stop pulling against the collar, you would stop choking. You'd be a lot happier. But the dog can't do it, And that is what pianists need to learn to do, is stop pulling against that choke collar and give yourself a margin. I'm playing at this tempo. I could play at this tempo. Up here is where the danger is, way out of the frame of the video camera. So I could play here, but I'm going to play here because I love that sense of ease and comfort where I have that margin, I have that fresh air, I have that room. Here's what it's like. A couple weeks ago, I was in the mountains in California, and to get up there, you have to drive on these curvy roads. It's Highway 180 in California. And there are curves that have a very steep drop-off, and not always a guardrail, So let's say some of those curves you could take at 50 miles an hour. And at 50 miles an hour, your car would be up on two tires. And at 51 miles an hour, you would roll over and down into the canyon and die in a fiery crash. How fast do you want to take that? Do you want to go 50 and be 1 mile per hour away from disaster, hoping that your adrenaline in the moment doesn't make you step on the gas more? Or would you like to go 40 or 35 and just coast comfortably, enjoy the scenery, and know that you're perfectly comfortable? So those are reasons for slow practice. Just a few thoughts to get us started. We'll continue next time with more stuff about how to practice.